in southeastern Europe, has an approximate population of 10.7 million as of 2021. With her geographical location at the crossroads of Europe, Asia, and Africa, Greece has witnessed a mammoth of crowd crossing into its shores. Both refugees seeking haven and illegal immigrants have all through the Greek shores. Greece is the cradle of Western civilization, being the birthplace of democracy, Western philosophy, Western literature, historiography, political science, major scientific and mathematical principles, theater and the Olympic Games. With the influx of illegal migration, Greece is straining to cope with the pressure exerted on its social and economic welfare despite its problems. In our new venture, we hope to highlight, depict and educate both the refugees, migrants and citizens on the challenges, determination and available successes that can be achieved in social cohesion and economic development if there's integration and equal opportunities.
I come from Kenya, in the central part, and I came to this country in Athens in 1987. It was very different from where I came from. The language, I would say almost everything. I expected probably something similar to where I came from, but it wasn't. And the first struck me as a place that I probably wouldn't stay for long. And I thought of going home 2 weeks after I came. But I met a few friends who told me if we are able to stick around, you can also probably do it. And the reason that made me think that I probably wouldn't stay here was the language. In English we say that if you speak something that is not comprehensible, it's difficult, we say it's Greek. Today, I'm of a different opinion, because all languages are difficult. But at that particular time, it looked like a mountain for me to climb, learning the language. And it was very, very difficult. That's one of the biggest challenges that I faced. And I believe most people who came to, especially Africans, if I may say so. But I also believe most people who came to this country then. It was a challenge, and with the encouragement that I got, from my fellow Kenyans and others, I decided to take a shot and, keep on trying. And fortunately, we followed a Greek language course, which took about 9 months. It wasn't easy, because the alphabet was different from the Latin alphabet that I knew. But after 1 or 2 months, I started feeling okay, comfortable in the sense that I had my compatriots, but at the same time, I was, catching up a bit. The most difficult thing about the Greek language is that it's a very rich language. The ancient Greek, the old Greek, and the new Greek. And we were being taught the new version, the new Greek. As they called it, Tanea Yatus Xenus. Tanea Elinika Yatus Xenus, the new language of foreigners. I don't know why they say the new language of foreigners, because it's their language. But even after 9 months, it was still quite a challenge, because the books were mainly written in the old language. And, because I went to school, the first year was a very, very daunting year, very difficult. Staying up very late at night, reading one chapter, trying to comprehend what exactly it meant. But finally, slowly, and surely, we did manage and finish the university. Apart from the language, that time there were not as many foreigners as we have today. And the Greeks were not really accustomed to foreigners as today, and especially to people of a different coloring, Africans. So everywhere you went, they would point fingers at you, look at the black man, as they say, marvelous. And sometimes, when you come from a place when you are not used to that, it was a little bit unsettling. Others would be outright resist, Others would hide, but you would sense 1, 2, 3 things they would do to you that were not proper, that they would still keep that distance. I wouldn't say that has actually finished in the society, in a Greek society. I would say they have come a long way, but they still have a long way as far as integration of foreigners is concerned. And especially people from, who look different in their coloring, their skin color. And it's something that sometimes impacted our lives, because wherever you'd go, they would first of all look at you, sometimes in shock. There are some people who looked at you as if it's their first time they had seen, somebody like you. And for instance, if you went looking for a job, you'd get the menu of jobs, you'd be paid less. Just like sometimes it happens even today. Nothing much has changed, actually. You find the things that were there were still there. And that word we call xenos didn't start today. It has always been there. But the word xenos was for anyone who was not a Greek. Because the Greeks, they want to feel they are only Greeks in their country. And anybody else is a xenos, especially if you are not born and raised here. And if you are, you speak a different language, it doesn't matter whether you are African or of European origin, you are still xenos. And penetrating the Greek society wasn't easy. It wasn't easy at all. Perhaps it's slightly easier today, or so it seems, but it is not. Because most Greeks will tell you, let's meet for coffee. But how many Greeks will tell you, please, come to my house? Very few. They would rather meet you outside, but not in their own houses. As a recent participant I had a certain lady ask a question, and she says, this was a lady, most ladies who have worked in houses. She said, we work in your houses, we know you, we know your food, but do you know us? Because we come to your houses. Because it's only by coming to our houses that you'd be able to understand who we are as Africans, as Asians, and so on. So it's been what you call a roller coaster for quite some time, and it's still a long way. Anyway, to go back to the time that I came to this country when it was actually changing. Greece had been run by the generals from 1967 to 1974. And when I came, politics looked similar to the African situation. And I came when the socialist government had taken over, 1981, as history shows us. And they came up saying Greece for Greeks. So you can imagine being a country where they are saying Greece for Greeks. So nowhere would you be considered. They didn't care. They didn't even think about the Europeans. They only said Greeks for, even though they wanted to enter the European Union, or they had entered, but they still insisted on themselves, this country being for them. And when you do that, the social fabric tends to come together and look at you and put you at a corner. Politically, political statements that they would make, they would say, okay, we welcome, foreigners, but that's a political statement. Socially, that's where you would find it's very difficult. It was very difficult. And you would always feel that even though you are in this country, you are a stranger. Somehow it's like you are not very welcome. It's only that they could not tell you to go away. And one of the things that most people who come to this country, they are ignorant of is that Greeks will tell you they are not racist. And sometimes people tend to believe it. But it's not the spoken word that sometimes shows that somebody is racist. It's the actions towards you that tell you what's going on. There is another current of racism, and that has always been there. And I don't know how long it will go. As a recent friend of mine, a Greek, I would call her a friend, but she's a lawyer, and we discussed this situation. And she told me actually that we talk in this country about integration of the migrants. Migrants meaning, the refugees, the immigrants and migrants. And she says, I'll take integration, or I'll accept that we have integrated when now we'll see foreigners working in the public sector. I mean, how many Africans have you seen in the, working in a public office, like other European countries? I'm not saying that those are also better. They still have their elements. But I'm saying in this country, it's almost, I haven't seen myself, unless you find one or two who has been put there for specific purposes, and not somebody who you will see easily. And I think I only saw one person where we had, where we used to get the, residence permits, and he was used for specific purposes. So it's been difficult to enter into the social fabric of this country, especially those earlier years. Today it's a different thing, because the second generation or the third generation, because I would call myself the first generation. Maybe there is another generation slightly ahead of me. But today we have what we have called a second generation, or rather a third generation. People who are in their teens, 18 years, 20 years, who have gone to school with Greek children, and they are more foreigners, and they have come to understand and to see, and mingle, even though there are situations whereby you find that it's been difficult. And as recently as about, say maybe not more than 10 years, Greeks were still against children who are going to school and who are doing excellent, and they could still accept them that, let's say in a national parade where the law says the best child has to hold the flag, it was almost like war. It took a long time for them to start accepting that it is possible for an African, for an Asian, for a person who is a non-Greek to participate. And I'm not saying that up to today is off the table, but I think that one has, it's no longer very, very much observed. As far as the issue, we had people who came here as students. In the early years, mainly it were the students who came to this country, and then we had people slowly trickling in. People who came looking for better life, and it was not until around, I think, 1997, around there, with the fall of the communist states, people start streamed in, like the Albanians, a lot of them. Then we had, massive people like today, the Syrians and all. It wasn't, we had different phases. We had, when we came, we had communities, but communities were mainly student communities. Up to around the late 1990s, when most of us, we had to change our communities and call them, a community and not a student community. And each group faced different, problems. There were some people who came here as sailors and stayed. They started working. They were exploited. Some were not paid their money. There was no insurance for a long time. I think until 1997, there was nothing like insurance. You were paid less if you worked, and the Greeks were taking advantage of the fact that the government did not allow you to work. And even if you finish as a student, you are not allowed to stay or to even work. So you either had to work without papers and hope that the police will not catch you, or the authorities, who go around checking will not get you. And if they do, then you are in trouble. There was also another problem with the students, people who came long time. If you are not on scholarship, they demanded that you should be getting money from outside and showing, bank papers, pink paper, I don't know, they were pink and white. And that used to be a big problem, because you could not get residence permit unless you showed those papers. And people used to do all sorts of things in order to try and get the papers. But eventually it became very difficult, and most people just decided we are not even going to. We just stay and hope that the government does not catch us until the policies have changed. Of course, one of the problems that foreigners have faced in this country is the government itself. Government policy has never been very straightforward as far as migrants are concerned, be it refugees, be it immigrants, be it immigrants. At one time, I remember when the Forum for Refugees and Immigrants was formed, I happened to be in a meeting where a public official was talking to us, and he asked us, as foreigners, how many foreigners are in this country. We were shocked. Why? Because it's like somebody coming to your house and asking you, it's like somebody coming to your house and you asking the person how many children you have, isn't it? So, and we were shocked because we thought the government knew how many immigrants there were. And that showed us how ignorant not only the society was, of course the government is a reflection of its own society, how ignorant both the society and the government was. And it has taken a long time, for them to formulate policies that would actually help not only the society, the Greek society, the country in general, but also to integrate, to bring forth, to bring together the people into the social fabric of this country. And even today, where they seem to be doing progress, they have taken another step backward by bringing in a law that essentially bars almost all people from even getting the citizenship. Politically, they say this is what they want, but in actual fact, it is an impediment. It is something, it's, when you bring a law that says you have to do, examinations and interviews for a foreigner who actually does not know the Greek itself properly. It's like you are doing an O-levels, as when you finish the secondary school, you do the national exam. I mean, if you are a foreigner and you are given this kind of situation, does it really mean that you don't know the language properly? They want to ask you philosophy, geography, history, and so forth. How are you gonna, get through this? This is something they have brought forward, telling the world that yes, we accept that we want to integrate these people, but in actual fact, it's like putting a door and telling you to go through it, and the door doesn't have a handle, or even if it has, it's a handle that is broken that cannot open at all. So it's been very, very difficult, and I don't know how far this will continue. But the good thing is, the immigrants, people who have come to this country, we are tenacious. We are people who are able to withstand a lot of problems, fighting for some of these situations, trying to change. It's a long journey. It's not going to be easy, but we are hoping that things will change with the time. Those of us who have stayed here a long time have faced different problems. Every generation has its own problems. As I said, we had the students, and then we had people who came to work. We also had two categories. People who came who had papers, they lost papers. That's when I say papers, the residence permits. And there are people who came, they didn't have anything. And that situation even today goes. Now we also now have what we call refugees. 15 years back, we started having problems in the Middle East and other places, and refugees started streaming in. So you have three categories now of immigrants, and that has brought in a bigger problem, because every now and then every government that comes in has been trying to change. They say we want to make things better, but whenever they come in, you find they come in and make things sometimes worse. And when your expectation is of one government trying to solve certain problems, they bring out a law because they are the same people. And that law becomes a bigger problem sometimes. The older generation would have expected that after staying in a country for quite some time, that there would be a consideration, let's say, of no longer having the residence permit, moving from the residence permit to getting citizenship. I know people who have stayed in this country, they have put their papers inside, and they tell you I've waited for 10 years. Then you wonder, why? What is that makes you wait for 10 years? It's not because they wouldn't give, but because they don't want to give. And even when they say that we have changed the system, that they are going to give, then they always come up with something. They tried to, to give as many people as possible during the last administration. At the same time, they formulated the new law that actually kind of almost stops the government from giving, the citizenship. People who have stayed in this country for long, this is their home, in a way. The second generation and that generation don't know other countries. You find children like, we have Yanis and such, who are born here. Even though they are Nigerians, they believe more that they are Greeks. And were it not been for what he does, for instance, Yanis is an exception together with some others. He would also be in that category, still waiting to get citizenship. Because there's a law that gives that window for people who excel in certain areas to be given. But you see, that should not be the case. People should be considered, all of them, in the right manner. And if somebody is worthy, then the law should be that people should get. I recently read an article, where the new government in Germany says, if you have stayed there for 3 years, and you're asking for a citizenship, then they will consider you, because they don't want to hold you at ransom. You stay in a country, you don't know whether you will go to another country or not. And that has been a problem in Greece. There is a question that why not, like for instance, we have so many, because Greeks, they say there are so many foreigners in this country, refugees and so forth. It's not easy to get them off this country, because other European countries also don't want them. There's that issue we call xenophobia. Each country is looking after its own self, even though they are talking about human rights and bringing in people who are who have been pushed out of their countries not because they want. At the same time, they talk about helping the same people, but in actual fact, those people are suffering. You find the funds which are supposed to be used to help those people sometimes are not really used in the right manner. You hear, refugees complaining that we are being moved from one house to the other. We are not being given, funds. At the same time, if you don't have papers, you can't work. You can't get even, certain health services. Greece cannot actually move those people to other countries unless other countries are willing to accept them. So, if they don't have a policy whereby these people will be integrated in some form, they'll help them, then this is a problem that will come up later on in life. Later on, because you can't push them back just like that. Otherwise, you'll be accused of human rights violations. But this is a problem they need to do away with. The next thing that we have the other people, who are not refugees, people who have stayed in this country. This country needs to formulate a very different policy, a policy whereby, they look at you, they say how long you have stayed here, what do you do, and so forth. And see whether they can give you, without putting a lot of doors blocking you, because by putting forward the law that they have come up, it does not actually help. What it's going to do is it will make people go back to the old situation whereby you lose your residence permit, because at some point you might have to lose that. Especially if you don't have work. And then you become like an outlaw. You don't have papers. And if you have a family, it's even worse. Because what do? Do you leave your family? If you have stayed here for many years, what do you do? That's a big problem that they have created. Integration means that you accept people to start, getting into various jobs, not just, jobs that, you do not need a lot of, education, office jobs and so on. But this country is not like that. I remember after I finished school, I went to an office in Piraeus, a shipping office. Actually, I went to an office where this man was operating also from my home country at the same time. He had some connections. And I said, well, probably he had a clear mind. He had a different approach. When I walked to that office, my friend, if eyes could only eat you, they almost ate me up. What do you want? So I said, I'm looking for a job. See, I never got the job anyway, because, as I said earlier, my friend she told me, I will know there is integration in this country when I will see people from Africa, from Asia, working in the public sector. Not the private, which is even worse also. The public sector. Because the private sector, the jobs are manual jobs, basically. Either for women in the houses, for men in restaurants, that is in the, restaurant service and so on. Or let's say people in farms. I'm not saying those jobs are bad. No. But I'm saying that the opportunity to be able to make a choice of a job that you want is not there. And it's not because we don't have people who are professionals. It's because the system, the government itself, its government policy, and the social fabric makes sure that you don't get. The only people who have ever been able to work in the jobs that they qualify are people who came from the medical department, people who are doctors, who work in a hospital, and nurses. And even there, I can tell you, you still find racism. I have a friend of mine. He's now a retired professor and a doctor. And he told me of an instance whereby they made sure they could not give him a job opportunity level because they wanted their own to be there. But for them to do that, they gave him a scholarship to go to Britain for 6 months. So by that time, when he came back, his friend, because this was basically a friend, when you say friends, not always is a friend, had already been elevated to that position. When he came back, Sky said, well, they just put me in, I didn't know. But you see, this was an orchestrated situation whereby racism is used as a means of making sure that you don't get certain opportunities. So unless you are a doctor, unless you are a nurse, other types of jobs are almost difficult to get. And that's why I haven't come across people who are, let's say, in marketing, in the other street, in many places. It's only now that people are trying to push, here and there. It's not easy. It has never been easy. It has always been. Because like any public service, things are done very, very slowly, and depending on where you go. I would say that Greece has changed from 2015 to today, not because it wanted to change. Sometimes Greeks will not agree, but it's obvious. It's because they were forced by circumstances. You know, the government became bankrupt, or they say the Greeks became bankrupt and they had to seek over 300 billion euros as loans. Then the Europeans, and especially Germany and the IMF, put a lot of, conditions. And some of these conditions were to streamline the public sector, doing away with some people, selling away public property, which wasn't, bringing in anything, and making sure that the system changed. Before, you had the Greeks saying, well, the law is for you, not for me. That was the syndema, or the way the Greeks, they used to say. They would tell you that the law is not for me, it's for you. Because the system was corrupt. I'm not saying it's 100%, it's not corrupt even today, but it was corrupt. People refusing to pay taxes, whereby the government doesn't have enough, and this country has a lot of money, and outside. So they were forced to change. And as you said, the IT sector, they had to bring in technology to make sure that most things are working. You find today you are paid through the bank. Before, you were never paid through the bank, and that was even worse for the foreigners, because you are paid by heart what your employer wanted, and you couldn't do him much. You didn't have paper, so you can't go anywhere. And even if he paid you, he never paid your pension scheme, because nowhere would you say you are working for him. Today you can't pay a salary or wages in the bank without paying this salary. You have to, because it shows. So the IT has kind of helped the Greek to streamline the public sector. However, it has not really done away with, that problem within the sector, the public sector, whereby you find that things take a long time. For instance, residence permits here, you would go and they will take you a year. You get a temporary paper, waiting to get a residence permit. Sometimes it will go past that 1 year. Sometimes they would call you when your residence permit, if they had given 2 or 3 years depending, is over. They will tell you renew again. They have not given you the one that you had applied, just a temporary one, but they tell you this is ridiculous. And especially now with the COVID, they have actually not given for more than a year. It's just recently, I think 2 months, they said they have opened the platform. And you have to wonder, these are people who are saying that they are working in the offices and they could do it online, but still it's problematic. So you find, even though technology is there, the mentality still remains, because the mentality of a people can sometimes hinder a lot of progress, whereby things which are supposed to be done very fast, they are done very, very slowly. Of course, I'm not saying that they are not trying, but they still have a long way. I don't know about the other countries, but from what I hear, in other countries things are done faster, especially if you have, if you are called to present your papers and so forth, and if you are okay, they are expedited quickly. but not in this country. This country, it can take you quite some time. Sometimes you have to do what they call ladama, corrupting the system in order for you to be able to do certain things or to get your situation solved quickly. When Greeks will change their mentality, then this country will move very much forward. But you can't stay in a situation where you say Greeks for Greeks, or let's say, like, for instance, where I come from, the country Kenya for Kenyans only, without moving forward. I think one of the things that needs to change is the government mentality. And what do I mean by the government mentality? It means changing the mentality of the lawmakers. They think that they can change by bringing certain laws which are without actually talking to the immigrants themselves. They say they talk to the immigrants, but yet what they do is they impose laws which actually hinder certain things. It's good always for a government to come forward and listen, and not just listen to specific groups. Listen to as many groups as possible, so that you understand where they are coming from, their desires, their worries, their problems, so that when you formulate a policy, that policy at least will look into all that, vice versa the society, because already the government knows its society. Of course, I do understand there is the political fallout if they enact certain laws that will probably help the immigrants. But if you are looking forward to integrate another society into your own, you'll have to take certain chances. And you'll have to come up with a policy whereby you say, this is exactly what is needed. If you want, first of all, there is the education part. Try to make sure that the people who come to this country enter the school system as much as possible, so that when it comes to issues like jobs and so forth, these people will be able to enter into the job market. I know it is difficult as far as the Greek system is concerned, but one of the things that can be done is try and give courses to immigrants whereby they will be self-sufficient. Self-sufficient in the sense that they can employ themselves. When people are not employed, they have no money. And if they don't have money, that means they do not have housing, do not have jobs. Then what that means is you will have people who will start behaving in a criminal manner, trying to survive. They will be violating the law, and you don't want, people you want to become citizens violating the law. And violating the law means that they will be in direct conflict with the Greek society. So, if they try to use education, vocational training as much as possible, because I think vocational training would be of much help. That would go far into helping most of the people who come in, because most of the people who come in are people already who are beyond the primary education level. You can't take them to the primary level. You can only take them to the vocational training. Their children, of course, will get into the primary section, the secondary, and so on. And for them, they can actually proceed nicely. But for those who are already grown-ups, vocational training would be much better. Another thing would be try to help them financially, not giving money as money for the sake of giving money, but bringing them together to finance trades. Let's say opening up of shops or setting up, small workshops, what they can do, so that with the time they will not only contribute economically to this country through taxes, through the pension scheme, but they will also feel part and parcel of this country, and they will do everything to make sure that their children will integrate fully. I know there is competition. Greeks will feel, the competition, because racism is basically a part of, is one of the areas of discrimination. Discrimination actually is the main thing. You are discriminated here, you are discriminated, irrespective of your race. Race is one thing. Now, people always feel threatened by outsiders because they feel maybe you are taking something something from them. But when you are part and parcel of an economy, like within the country, and they see you are not going anywhere, and you are giving back, with the time, even the person who felt threatened will eventually come to appreciate you as a foreigner. And because a country like Greece, which have sent thousands from the 1900s to America, to Australia, Canada, it has a lot of Greeks outside. It's supposed to understand that what an immigrant is. Unfortunately, both the government and the public sometimes behave as if they don't understand this. Sometimes you hear them talk about it, certain individuals of course, but the government doesn't steer the public towards understanding that our people face the same situation and we need to be more responsive. They don't put a lot of action into that. That's one other area that the government needs to do. It lacks in communication to its own people. Rather, what it portrays, especially successive governments, is that Greece is for Greeks. When you do that, then the attitude and the mentality of the common Greek person remains more or less the same, and takes a long time for those changes to happen. So I believe economically, the government needs to do something. And both economically, by financing, the setting up of foreigners, those who have the, certain trades, educating not especially the children, because that's okay, but especially those who are willing, to take up certain trades so that they get incorporated and set up themselves. So one of the things that all of us need to do, whether you are a refugee, an immigrant or immigrant, is to try and learn the language as fast as you can, because it will open up to understanding the country. It will open you up to understanding what you need to do as far as your paperwork is concerned, whether you have an intention of leaving the country or not. Because sometimes you don't know how long you will be in a country. So that if you happen to stay in a country beyond what you thought, at least you are conversant with the situation, you are able to get your way through, and it will help you not only in your job, in so many things, with the public sector, with your papers and so on. That's one of the main things that most foreigners don't do. They keep saying, I am on the move, and they are not moving out of the country. The second thing is, I have had people say, I don't like this country. And I've always said, where you came from, especially if you are not a refugee, you came out because that place who you call home was not good. But you are here again saying, I don't like this country. And I've always said, if you don't like a country, there's only one option. Take your bags and move. Otherwise, if you stay in a country and you keep saying, I don't like this country, then know that you'll have a lot of problems. You go to a job, you keep saying, I don't like that job. You go to a house, I don't like a job. You go to anything, you never find something that is good in that kind. You will have a miserable life. And ours is not to have a miserable life. These are two main things that at least I can say. Other things, as I mentioned earlier, trying to take advantage, educational facilities, because one of the things that most foreigners today are not doing is taking the opportunity of going to school. That is something that most people forget. We tend to want just to work, I'll work, get money, and do what with the money. So those three are key things.
Okay.
Other things may come after that, looking, if you don't want to move. Okay, all of us, even for me being one, I've made a mistake, trying to get the citizenship, buying a house if you can. Because if you intend to stay forever in a country, like Greece, you need to look for, a house. Okay, there was an opportunity between 2015 and 2020. Houses were cheaper because of the crisis, but they are no longer, they are going up. But even though, if you want to stay permanently in a country, these are some of the things that you have to look at. Rather than saying, I am on the move, and you are not moving. My desire is exactly what I have been talking about, integration, and not just in words. Integration meaning, my desire is to see, especially the young generation, getting involved in all sectors of life in Greece. And in all sectors, that means I would like to see them employed even within the public sector. Not because of their color or anything, but because they are able to do the same jobs like everybody else, because they have got the same education. Because when you go to a place and you are refused, not because you don't have the education, but you are refused because of your color or where you come from, to me that is wrong. That's one of the things that I would like. I would like the society to be able to accept that they can go to a public office, meet an African, meet an Asian, a European of a different nation working there, and not feel that he or she is not supposed to be there. Because they agree to feel that you should not be there. You work in the same job, even the menial jobs that we normally work, and somebody will ask you, the first question is, how much money do you get? And if you happen to be getting slightly more, he will feel bad. And you ask, what is the difference? What's the difference between you and me? We are doing exactly the same job. Maybe I'm even doing much better. And just because you are Greek, you want to be paid more. Is it fair? Of course, it's not fair. So my desire would be that the society changes, but this has to come first and foremost through government policies. Changing policies that are not geared to helping integration. Integration is not just putting, policies which hinder integration. It's about putting policies that help the social fabric, to come together, whereby you integrate, you are able to come together, in a way that it's not being hindered by anything. Let's say, or I carry a burden on my shoulder that I cannot shrug off or remove from me. Somebody said, yes, there's a lady the other day I heard on television, she said, after so many years struggling to get residence permit and so on, I finally become a Greek citizen. But she added and said, I still look over my shoulder when I see the police, because the element of not having papers is still there. In other words, still in her mind, the citizenship doesn't necessarily mean that you have integrated, because integration means, far more. It's just one step. Citizenship will just provide you, and I'm for that actually. I am for the government trying to give more citizens, especially to the second generation, and those who have been here for a long time, to stabilize not only families, but for people who feel that this is also their own country. That should be there, so that we don't feel like we are disenfranchised. What I would like is, especially for the second generation, is to listen as much as possible to what we have gone through, because it is said that a person without history cannot, see the future. History is actually a part of us, and most of us went through a very difficult time whereby we struggled in various ways when things were not proper or were not, there was no formulated policies in this country as far as foreigners are concerned. I would like them to understand that when they see certain situations here, they should see them in the context of where we are coming from, that we went through thick and thin. I remember we used to almost sleep at certain areas in order to get a working permit before you could get a residential permit. It didn't matter whether it was cold or not, and you are not sure of getting it even. I mean, we have worked jobs that sometimes you felt if in your own country probably would have been in a different position. But we didn't, right? We worked through thick and thin in order to change certain things. Of course, we haven't changed many things. But from that experience alone, the struggle, because as somebody says, the struggle continues always in all societies. I would like them to keep on struggling to make things better for themselves. For us, we have done the much we could in trying to make sure that this society changes as much as possible. It has changed, but not that much. It still needs to change more. And that more means taking the generation today and embracing them as their own, truly their own, not just saying it, but also in action. They need also to make sure that they move away from the jobs that we actually did as old people. Try and penetrate as much as possible, because they have grown up through the education system of this country. They have no problem in the language, so they can at least try and enter, sector by sector, sector by sector. They are the ones actually who probably will do away with this situation, whereby, in the public sector, because I'm sure if the public sector accepts the first generation, the private sector will not be a big problem. We have seen, changes in this country. We have seen, people setting up shops. Let me say about 30 years ago, getting a license to operate a small shop was second to impossible. They would ask you, they brought out a law saying that you would have to bring in over 70,000 euros in order to open. That was, that's why I'm saying the government is the one that needs to change. Now, the young generation needs to work on that. First, embrace education, and then get into jobs that are not jobs that we did. Move out from the kind of jobs that we did in as much as possible. I know it's difficult, but it's possible.
Thank you.